When you're eyeing a gaming laptop, the first thing that pops up is the fear of getting something that looks great on paper but ends up being a daily pain. You wonder if the refresh rate will actually make a difference in your favorite shooters, whether the storage will hold all those mods, or if the price you're paying is really just a brand premium. That's exactly where I wanted to be clear from the start. This isn't a hype-filled unboxing. I've spent a few weeks running the HP Victus 15.6 through real-world workloads, and I'll break down what matters: value, everyday usability, and those hidden trade-offs you don't see in the spec sheet. Link is in the description if you want to check the product details on Amazon. First off, let's talk about who this machine is really built for. If you're a casual gamer who plays titles like Fortnite, Valorant, or some indie RPGs, and you also need a laptop that can handle Zoom calls, spreadsheets, and a bit of video editing, the Victus lands squarely in that sweet spot. The Ryzen 7 7445Hz paired with an RTX 4050 gives you enough headroom to push 1080p games at high settings without choking the battery, and the 16GB of DDR5 RAM means you won't be swapping out pages while you stream. On the flip side, if you're a hardcore esports competitor chasing ultra-low latency or you're planning to run demanding AAA titles at 4K, you'll start to feel the ceiling. The RTX 4050 is solid for 1080p, but it won't match a 3080 class GPU, and the 512GB SSD can fill up fast when you add large game installs and a media library. Now, let's walk through a typical day with this laptop. I start the morning by firing up Chrome and a bunch of tabs for research, then swing open the built-in webcam for a quick Teams meeting. The webcam is decent enough for business calls, though it does struggle in low-light rooms. After the call, I launch Steam and queue up Apex Legends. Thanks to the 144Hz panel, the motion feels noticeably smoother than the 60Hz displays I used to have. In fast-pacing gunfights, the extra frames reduce perceived blur, and the game feels more responsive. That's the kind of practical benefit you notice when you're actually playing, not just reading 144Hz on a spec sheet. When it comes to storage, the 512GB SSD is fast. Boot times are under 15 seconds and loading screens in most games shave a good half-minute off what you'd expect on a SATA drive. The downside shows up once you start juggling a few modern titles. Cyberpunk 2077, Elden Ring, and Assassin's Creed Valhalla together can easily eat up 200GB. You'll have to be intentional about what you keep locally versus what you stream or reinstall later. The laptop does have an extra M.2 slot, but accessing it requires opening the bottom panel, which isn't a big deal if you're comfortable with a screwdriver but could be a hurdle for the less tech-savvy. Thermal performance is another area where the Victus reveals its design philosophy. Under a light workload browsing, Office apps, the fan stays quiet, and the laptop feels warm but not uncomfortable on your lap. When I pushed the game load to ultra settings, the fans kicked in more aggressively, hitting a low to mid-40°C range on the CPU. The laptop dissipates heat fairly well for a mid-range chassis, but you'll notice the fan ramp up during long sessions. It isn't a screaming fan, but the noise becomes noticeable if you're trying to record gameplay without a separate microphone. For most users, that trade-off is acceptable. You get decent cooling without the bulk of a high-end workstation. Battery life is a realistic concern for any portable gamer. HP advertises around 67 hours of mixed usage, and that lines up with my testing. With the screen at 50% brightness and the GPU idling, I got roughly 5.5 hours before needing a recharge. Once I crank up a game, the runtime drops to about 2 hours, which is typical for laptops with a dedicated graphics chip. So if you plan to game on the train or in a coffee shop without a power outlet, you'll need to manage expectations or keep a charger handy. Let's not forget the extras. HP bundles a cloth mouse pad with the Victus, which is a nice little touch if you're buying a new mouse anyway. The keyboard itself is backlit, with a comfortable travel distance that feels familiar to anyone who's used a laptop for a while. The keys have a satisfying click without being too loud, good for late-night gaming sessions. There's also a decent set of ports, 2 USB-A, a USB-C with DisplayPort support, HDMI 2.1, and a headphone jack. That gives you flexibility to connect an external monitor or a USB headset without needing a dongle. Who should walk away from this review? If you're a budget shopper who's happy with older titles or you only need a workhorse for everyday tasks, you might find a cheaper Ultrabook a better fit. The Victus sits in a price bracket